Hi, welcome to Done with Diets. My name is Kara Kaur. I am an ACSM certified personal trainer with multiple nutrition certifications and decades of experience in research with nutrition and helping clients get on track with their nutrition. The idea of this PowerPoint and this presentation is really for you to understand what you need nutritionally to work towards your goals so that you never have to try any various diets again. There's so much misinformation out there, and we're going to just cut through all the misinformation and show you what you need to know. So step one, why do we diet? To lose weight or to lose fat? What's the goal? And I get mixed answers for this a lot of times, but the real reason is people want to lose fat. They don't want to lose muscle tissue, right? And as you can see here, fat is larger, takes up more space than muscle. Muscle is 18% more dense than fat. Another thing that you need to know about muscle versus fat is storage tissue. That is where energy goes to be stored for when you need it for a later time. Muscle is active tissue. So muscle, even when it's sitting still, it's burning calories. Fat, when it's just storage in your body, it's not doing anything. It's not burning any calories, just existing. Muscle, on the other hand, is. So if we want to increase our metabolism and burn more calories throughout the day, it makes sense to increase our muscle mass. Even if you're not losing body fat, if you have an increase in muscle mass, your metabolism is going to go up. And that's really the goal, right? We want our metabolism to go up and our fat to go down. And so that means we want our muscle tissue to increase and our fat tissue as a byproduct to decrease. So how do we lose fat? Is it calories in versus calories out? Is it really all that simple? Yes, in a sense, that is absolutely true. It is really that simple. However, there are some caveats that you need to know about. So yes, because reducing your overall caloric intake does in fact stimulate weight loss. When we take in less energy, calories, than we expend through exercise and our basal metabolic needs. So just your need to exist, the beating of your heart, the blinking of your eyes, the ability to move your fingers and toes, your nervous system working, your brain, its operation, that is your basic metabolic needs. Your BMR is called, or your basal metabolic requirements. Our body is forced to burn fat and muscle for fuel if it needs it. So this process is called ketosis. That's a word I want you to understand. So the keto gets flung around a lot as a type of diet, and it is. But all that really means, being in a state of ketosis, means that you don't have any glucose in your body. So you're going to burn fat for fuel. And that's what we want, right? We want to burn the fat for fuel so that we reduce our overall body fat. Now, where people go wrong with keto diets is if you eat too much fat, if you're consuming that fat and you're digesting it, guess what it's going to do with it? It's going to burn that for fuel. And that's eating too many calories. So, and even if you go on a low-fat diet, you need to understand that the total reduction of calories that you're consuming is really still putting you into ketosis. It's the same process, burning fat for fuel, whether you do it through going on a keto diet or whether you do it through fasting or whether you do it by going on a low-calorie diet, low-carb diet, or a low-fat diet, doesn't really matter. It's all the same process. So understand that. But it's never as simple as calories in versus calories out. Number one, your total caloric basal metabolic rate, and then any exercise that you do can vary what your caloric intake needs are for that day. So that's just something to keep in mind. Any calorie-based plan that you're on, where you have a limit of calories that you need to take in every day in order to lose weight or gain weight, right? That is really an approximate number. We don't really know exactly how many calories our body is burning. We're just guessing, right? We're making educated guesses. So it's never that simple. The human body is a master of adaptation, and many things can affect your metabolism, including hormones, especially for women in midlife, which is why we often experience plateaus and weight loss. The good news is that there are techniques that you can implement to help avoid and overcome plateaus. There are a lot of things that can affect your metabolism: thyroid, your estrogen and testosterone levels, hormones in general, lots of different hormones, including cortisol, a few others. So if you struggle, even though you're consistently sticking to some sort of caloric limit and you're trying to lose weight or gain weight for that matter, it could be a hormonal issue that is keeping you from having the success that you're looking for. That said, you really have to make sure that you're tracking and you're truly sticking within a caloric limit that will either help you gain or lose weight, depending upon your goals. If you're not tracking, then you're just guessing. Keep that in mind. So step one, understanding your dietary needs. That's the most important thing. So on this page, you can see there are a few examples. What I wanted to try and show you is what a healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner would look like, right? You can see that it's all plant-based. The image on the far left is a picture of chia pudding, which is made with chia seeds and some sort of milk. You could use a plant-based milk or a dairy milk, depending upon your own personal preferences and what your macros allow for. We'll get into what macros are here in a second. And then in the middle picture, that is a picture of a Greek salad. So again, you can see it's plant-based and there's a few ounces of protein on there. So that looks like chicken breast. You've got some feta cheese that'll add a little extra protein, some flavor. And then it's plenty of vegetables. And in the third picture on the far right, you see a nice slice of salmon, maybe with some sesame seeds on it there, and then a healthy, hearty salad with it. So this is what a typical meal should look like, assuming that you're trying to lose weight in a healthy way. Okay, now if you're trying to gain weight, it might look a little differently. So what are macros and why do they matter? Macros is short for macronutrients, which refers to the three major nutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. This is in contrast to micronutrients, which refers to vitamins and minerals. So quickly, I want to add that although they are not technically macronutrients, fiber and alcohol are a couple of other things that you need to consider. So fiber, even though it is not digestible, and that's kind of the point, it is something that you need on a regular basis. Fiber helps to feed the good bacteria in your gut. It works as a prebiotic, depending on the type of fiber that it is. So fiber is really good for your gut health, and it helps make you feel fuller longer. So if weight loss is a goal, you want to increase your fiber content. And then alcohol. Alcohol, even though it isn't a macronutrient, it is its own little category. So your body kind of processes it like alcohol. I'm sorry, like sugar. So alcohol is processed in the liver, and your body will store excess alcohol as fat. Generally, that fat is stored around the liver and can lead to fatty liver disease. That's why too much alcohol is bad. So anyway, you can still enjoy alcohol in moderation, but you need to know that about it, okay? Understanding the balance of macronutrients you should be consuming on any given day is the key to meeting your weight control goals. It really is, and that's what we're going to get into next. So protein. Protein is 4 calories per gram. It is the most important macronutrient you will consume daily. It's important to understand this because protein, so in the media, you'll often hear like, oh, fat is bad, oh, carbs are bad, but nobody's ever going to say to you that protein is bad because it's super, super important. It's also the macronutrient that from a percentage perspective is probably not going to change much. And as far as what your body needs on a regular basis, most people need about 25 to 35% of their calories to come from protein. And I would wager that most of you are not getting that. So proteins make up about 15% of the mass of the average person. Protein molecules are essential to us in an enormous variety of different ways. Much of the fabric of our body is constructed from protein molecules, including muscle, cartilage, ligaments, skin, and hair. These are all mainly protein materials. In addition to these large-scale structures that hold us together, smaller protein molecules play a vital role in keeping our bodies working properly, such as hemoglobin, hormones, insulin, antibodies, enzymes. These are all examples of less obvious proteins. Whether you are a vegetarian or a meat eater, you must have protein in your diet. The protein in the food that we eat is our main source of the chemical building blocks we need to build our own protein molecules. Protein has a very mild effect on blood sugar and insulin levels. So we'll talk more about blood sugar and insulin levels later in the presentation, but what you need to understand here is that protein is super important. in the picture that you see on the right here, these are some sources of protein. A lot of people don't know that peas are an excellent source of protein. Obviously, animal protein in the form of meat or fish are all sources of protein. Plant-based protein oftentimes comes from peas. It can often also come from soy. But soy is also highly allergenic for a lot of people. I personally am allergic to soy, so you have to find sources of protein that work for you. And you can be a vegetarian and still get enough protein. You just have to be very conscientious about getting enough and where you get your sources from. Tempeh is a good one. So let's now move on to fat. So fat. For many years, fat was demonized in the media. It was, in the 80s, we were all fat-free. But what happened was people actually gained weight. Well, why did we gain weight if we cut out all this fat? So the reason that low-fat diets worked for anybody is because, as you can see, fats are 9 calories a gram. That is more than double what carbs or protein are per gram. Alcohol pops in there at 7 calories a gram, just FYI. But fats are the highest amount of calories per gram. They are very energy dense. But they are essential. They're absolutely essential. They are not bad for you. The types of fats that you choose do matter, though. So fat is needed to build cell membranes, the vital exterior of each cell, the sheaths surrounding nerves. It is essential for blood clotting, muscle movement, and inflammation. Inflammation being a good thing, right? As long as you don't have too much of it. For long-term health, some fats are better than others. Good fats include monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. Bad ones include industrial-made trans fats. Saturated fats fall somewhere in the middle. So saturated fats are not good nor bad, right? It's like you got to think of it as the poison is in the dose. So a little bit of butter here and there is not going to kill you. Butter and coconut oil in everything, probably not a great idea. Okay, so have a little more olive oil. Something important to remember about your fats is that the temperature at which you use them does matter. So olive oil is a great example of this. It's a cold pressed oil, and it doesn't have a high heat threshold before it starts to denature and create free radicals. When you have a bunch of free radicals in your body, then you need extra antioxidants to counteract that. So the best idea is just not to use olive oil for high heat cooking. Don't fry in it, right? That's what avocado and coconut oil are for. You can fry in those. And now you're finding that some actual bottles of these oils will tell you what the temperatures that you can use them at are. So good rule of thumb, cold pressed oil, use cold. This is not always the case, but cold pressed oil, use cold. And then, saturated fats, you can absolutely, because they can tolerate higher heat, like coconut oil, for example, then you can fry in those. Avocado oil, oftentimes that's one of those exceptions to the rule because it can be cold pressed and you can still use it at high heat. Avocado oil is a great high heat cooking oil. Olive oil is a great salad dressing oil. So those are a couple ways to use those oils. Gram for gram, fat is the highest caloric energy macronutrient, weighing in at 9 calories a gram. Like I said, it's more than double the caloric value of protein and carbohydrate, which is the weight loss principle behind low-fat diets. So when they cut out fat, they cut out a lot of calories. It still puts you into ketosis because you reduced your overall intake of calories, assuming you stuck to it. But the problem was that, a lot of low-fat foods, for example, Snackwell's cookies that were really huge in the 80s and 90s, they took all the fat out of them, but they substituted that fat for sugar. And when we increased the amount of sugar in our diet, that increased the amount of cravings that people had, and they ended up eating more and then storing those extra calories as fat. So keep that in mind. Fat is the only macronutrient that does not affect your insulin levels at all. They don't move. If anything, they dip a little bit, your insulin levels. So that's another reason, and we'll get more into the insulin connection here later in the presentation, why a lower carb, higher fat diet can be more successful for people when it comes to weight loss or even weight management. Doesn't mean that you're eating burgers and bacon and ribs all the time. It means that you're just reducing your overall carb intake, and the carbs that you are choosing are high in fiber. And let's talk about carbs next. So carbs, 4 calories per gram. All right, so unlike protein and fat, which are both very essential. Carbohydrates are non-essential macronutrients. They're the only one that you can live your entire life without. Okay, you cannot live without protein, you cannot live without fat, but you can live without carbs. I know it sounds crazy because we think, and we've been taught for years, that, oh, your body needs carbs for energy. Think of it like this. It is your body's preferred energy source. It's the easy energy source. So it's also easy to grab Ritz crackers out of your cabinet and eat those rather than make yourself a salad with some salmon on top. Okay, it's an easy fuel source. It's not the best one necessarily. Depends on your goals. So carbohydrates are non-essential macronutrients. Unlike protein and fat, you don't need them. Carbohydrate-rich foods such as fruits and vegetables can be loaded with beneficial and essential micronutrients. So that right there is the real benefit of carbs. They are loaded, especially fruits and vegetables. They are absolutely loaded with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants for that matter. So that's where they're really good for you. So if you take a look at the two pictures on the left here, you've got the unprocessed carbohydrates on the top. These are the good ones, and the highly processed ones on the bottom. Those are the not so good ones, right? So, for example, fruits and vegetables, as long as you're not basing your diet in them. So in other words, like Weight Watchers is known for having a plan that allows you to have as much fruit as you want. It sounds good in theory, but people don't actually lose weight on that plan as rapidly as they would on some of the other plans that restrict them, primarily because if you look at fruit as a free food, you're going to end up eating too much sugar. Right? You know, if you're eating bananas and pineapple and mango and oranges and other higher sugar fruits, you're going to end up, especially if you cut all the fibrous pieces off of them. Like, for example, an orange, if you don't eat the pith and you're only eating the inside of the orange, then you've cut out all the fiber. You know, bananas are not bad for you. You don't have to just eat half of a banana. However, if you're eating 2 or 3 or 4 bananas in a day, or you're making a smoothie with them and you're condensing them, you're really not going to have as much success as if you're just maybe having 1 banana a day. Okay, again, depends on your goals. So if you're trying to gain weight, you might have a little extra. Now, processed carbs means pretty much they don't look anything like what they grew as. So pasta doesn't look like wheat, bread doesn't look like wheat, you know, oats and rice are still kind of in those better choice options. However, like you would want to stick to like maybe a wild rice or rolled oats or and make sure that what you're eating them with isn't full of sugar. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about carbs specifically. Carbohydrate is used to make glycogen in the muscles. However, in the absence of carbohydrate-produced fuel from glucose, that quick fuel, right, that easy fuel, the body will convert fat stores to energy in a process called ketosis. During ketosis, the body converts stored fat cells to ketones, which the body uses for a slow and steady fuel instead of quick-burning glucose. That's if you're trying to lose weight, that's what you want to happen. That's why low-carb diets, when you stay within a caloric limit, are very, very successful because you're training your body to look at fat for a fuel source in the absence of its easy fuel, which is carbs. So take away the easy fuel and the only choice that's left for your body is for it to burn the fat stores, right? Unless you feed it a bunch of extra fat. If you have, 200 grams of fat in a day, you're not going to burn what's on your hips. You're going to burn what you ate in your belly. So you have to be conscientious of that too. Carbohydrates are divided into 2 main categories: fiber-rich, complex carbohydrates, good carbs, and fiber-devoid, simple carbohydrates, aka bad carbs. So really the only difference between good carbs and bad carbs are the naturally occurring amounts of fiber in them. Now you'll see artificially inflated, fiber-rich processed foods. For example, like maybe a fiber bar that you might eat and it's full of psyllium husk. It might be really high in fiber. However, that fiber is not naturally occurring in that product. And so it may cause gastric discomfort, gas, bloating, some other unpleasant side effects. So you want to choose foods that are naturally high in fiber, like rolled oats or flaxseed or chia seeds or some of these other really fiber rich, naturally occurring. Like if you took rolled oats and you mix that with chia seeds and flax seeds, that's a much, much better choice than having something that is like a bread that's highly inflated in its fiber content with the addition of psyllium husk, for example, okay? Carbohydrates, including so-called good carbs, do have the largest impact on blood sugar and insulin levels of all the macronutrients. Remember, simple carbs drive your hunger cravings. Fibrous carbs satiate. So again, all comes back to the fiber content. Berries are a great example of this because blackberries and raspberries are very high in fiber. You're eating all the seeds because they're in it. So those are better choices when it comes to a higher fiber fruit. If you're going to eat the orange, don't cut it into sections and take all the white stuff off the outside, because then that's the fiber. You're throwing that away and you're just eating the sugary part. Eat the fiber. You'll thank me later. So let's talk about diet plans. First diet plan, low carb. So this is the one that's like the biggest right now. And it's because in a lot of ways they work. It's just how you implement them that really matters. So you can do it in a healthy way. So you've probably heard of Atkins, the bulletproof diet, or at least bulletproof coffee, Paleolithic, Whole30, South Beach, keto, low carb, high fat, or the LCHF, and sugar busters. These are all examples of low carb diets. That is the principle behind their weight loss. Low fat diets. Low fat diets include the American Heart Association diet, diabetes diet, which diabetes diet is now changing its tune. They're going a little more low carb. Vegetarian diets tend to be low fat, and 80-10-10 is pretty much, essentially it's you're really, really limiting your fat in that one. The ABS diet, Jenny Craig, Ornish diet, Pritikin diet, no fat diet. These are all diets that traditionally have been low fat, even though some of them are now transitioning to a more low carb approach as we've learned more about sugar and its effect on the body. And then finally, low calorie diets. Essentially, they don't really necessarily restrict any macronutrient. They just count on you eating less overall calories in a day. So Weight Watchers, raw vegan diets tend to be very low calorie simply because raw vegan food is very low calorie. You'd have to eat a lot of nuts and seeds to increase that. Vegan diets for the same principle. Slim fast diet, obviously you're only having 2 shakes and a small meal a day. That's low calorie. Intermittent fasting, I want to talk a second about intermittent fasting too, because intermittent fasting, the principle is that you're reducing your overall caloric intake, right? You shorten the window that you eat in. So a good example of an intermittent fast would be that you start eating, you break your fast at maybe noon or 1 o'clock. So you don't eat anything all morning. And then you stop eating at like maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And then you don't eat anything until the next day at like 12 or 1 o'clock again. So that's effective because when you're not eating and you're not providing your body with that quick fuel, that glucose, good, or whether they're simple carbs or they're complex carbs, it's still quick fuel, right? When you don't supply your body with that, what does it got to do? It has to burn fat. So you're kicking it into burning fat. Now, where people go wrong with intermittent fasting is they stuff as much food into that short window as they possibly can. And then they end up overeating calories and they just do it in a smaller period of time. Don't get caught in that trap. Intermittent fasting can actually be helpful. However, you have to stay within that caloric limit. The calories in versus calories out still matters. Another low calorie diet is the lemonade diet. That's also a fad diet, by the way. It's nonsense. And juice cleanses, again, nonsense, maybe an unpopular opinion here, but you have a liver and kidneys for that. You don't need juice, okay? Your body does its own cleansing. So which diets maybe have you tried? The low carb diet, right? You can see that 65% of your calories are coming from fat. It sounds like a lot, I know, but keep in mind that fat is 9 calories a gram, protein is 4, and carbs are 4 calories per gram. So gram for gram, obviously the fat is going to be a much higher percentage because you're cutting out all those carbs, and the rest of your calories have to come from somewhere. So they come from fat. Low fat diet. Notice that the protein amount is pretty much the same, right? All that's really changed is you flipped the carbs for the fat. Now, this diet's going to leave you feeling hungry because you are not eating the satiating things. The most satiating nutrients that exist are protein, fat, and fiber. So that should be the basis of your diet if you're trying not to have cravings. Lastly, the low-calorie diet. So low-calorie diet's a little more balanced in its approach. Generally, they allow a little more carbs on these low-calorie diets, if you look at Weight Watchers, for example. But, again, protein's about 25%. And that's a, I would say, conservative estimate of your caloric needs there. And it's a little more balanced between your carbs and your fat here. However, it's completely relying on you eating less calories, and it doesn't even take into account whether or not you're going to have cravings, which you are guaranteed you will. So notice one's 1,300 calories, the low carb diet, the low fat diet's 1,300 calories. We get into low calories, we're talking about maybe only 1,000 calories a day. Now, this is for someone that's a small person. Your caloric intake may look a little different, but just to give you an example of maybe somebody that's about my size, which is less than 130 pounds and only 5 feet tall. I don't need a lot of calories. Someone that's a lot taller than me would need more. They have a higher energy basal metabolic rate. So calculating your caloric needs. There are several calculators on the web, but MyFitnessPal is the one that I recommend. It has been around for well over a decade. You can do it from your desktop. You can do it from your phone. You can do it from your iPad, a tablet. So it's a really useful app. They're going to tell you that you can upgrade and pay for the premium version. The fact is that you can get everything you need out of the free version. So don't feel obligated to upgrade unless you want some of those additional features. These calculators will help you determine your basal metabolic rate, or what it should be, and calculate approximately how many calories you need to lose weight. Now, or to gain weight for that matter. I want you to remember this is approximate. This is an educated guess. It is a formula based on your height and weight and age. So one of the things that you need to remember about age is that the assumption is, with these calculators, the assumption is that as you age, you lose muscle mass and you lose bone density. And so they're going to reduce the total caloric need. Now, if you're somebody that's highly active, and I don't mean active like you run around a tennis court or you walk a golf course, I mean active like you're in the gym strength training 3 to 4 times a week or more, you are going to need more calories than what it's going to calculate for you. So, or if you're very inactive, you might need less calories than it approximates for you. But keep in mind that anything that is a calculator is just an educated guess. Okay, so you may have to tweak up or down what your caloric needs actually are. So let's look at a couple examples. Somebody who's 40 years old, just barely 5 feet tall and 140 pounds, exercises 5 days a week with intense activity. That means her heart rate is getting up. She is active. She goes to cardio. She's getting those workouts in. It says her maintenance BMR is 2,114 calories and weight loss is 1,691. Extreme weight loss is 1,268. I can tell you, because this is my height, I can tell you that that is not accurate for me. So it's an estimate, and that's what I want you to learn here. You're going to have to play with it a little bit to figure out what's exactly right for you. I'm here to help you do that if you need some assistance and some guidance, but understand that these are estimates, okay? Example B, somebody who's 70 years old, same height, same weight, little less active. Look at the difference in the caloric needs. Huge difference. Maintenance BMR is now 1482. That is because it is assuming she has less muscle mass. May or may not be true, right? So maybe she's doing some heavy weight training, and she did years ago. Maybe she was a power lifter. She might actually need more calories. maybe her activity is just walking. Maybe she's not really doing much strength training at all. She might actually need less calories than that. So again, approximate. Now let's look at a gentleman. We're talking about a man now. He's much taller, almost 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. He's got 3 days a week of activity, elevated heart rate for about 15 to 30 minutes. Look at the difference in his caloric needs. It's simply because he's a bigger person, okay? And if this man was 20 years younger, that maintenance BMR would be even higher, okay? So again, totally approximating these goals. And it depends on what your activity level is. You know, if you're really highly active and you're strength training all the time, you might need more. If you're really, really not active and you're relatively sedentary, you might need less, okay? All right, so we're going to talk about now choosing a plan that actually fits your lifestyle. You don't want to just go on a diet. You want to actually change your diet. You want to pick something that works within your life. It doesn't make sense that if your whole family is Italian and you're used to eating pasta every night, that you're going to go on a ketogenic diet. You're going to need to find something that's a little more flexible, or you're going to have to get your whole family on board with you. So you have to find something that works for you. Prepare mentally to make a permanent lifestyle change. Dieting is not a temporary thing. If you struggle with your weight, whether it's you're underweight or you're overweight or just maintaining your weight, and you struggle with that, you have to make a commitment to a healthier eating pattern for life. It can't just be something that you do after you know, a lot of people, especially with this seasonal atmosphere of people that I work with, you get down to your seasonal home in Florida and it's party time. It's get together with the friends every weekend and, you know, have a couple drinks, and that adds up. You know, a serving of wine is 4 to 5 ounces, but it's not that hard to kill a bottle or two when you're hanging out with friends. So try to pull yourself out of vacation mode and recognize this is a lifestyle. Learn to limit yourself. You know, the Blue Zone's perspective is stop when you're 80% full. That's good advice, you know, especially when it comes to eating, but you can also apply that to alcohol. When you're like 80% feeling that buzz, maybe it's time to start drinking some water, okay? Slow it down. Be realistic with your fat loss expectations. You know, genetics plays a huge factor here. Some people genetically hold on to body fat, especially in different places. For me, I hold body fat in my hips and thighs. I don't really hold it in my waist. I'm fortunate in that respect. Lots of people hold it in their abdomen, and they might have thin legs and thin arms, but they carry all of their body weight, or their body fat, I should say, in a spare tire wrapped around their waist. That is the most unhealthy way to carry weight. So if you carry a lot of body fat in your midsection, you really need to be even more hyper aware of staying within a healthy weight. But be realistic. Don't expect to look like somebody who trains, you know, 5 days a week if you're only doing a couple days a week worth of exercise. You know, be comfortable with a little bit of body fat. One thing that you guys also need to understand is, like, bodybuilders, for example, people that are competitively doing bodybuilding, their body is not healthy. It is not healthy to be that lean, especially for women. We are meant to carry some body fat. Like 20 to 30% body fat is average, okay? So don't beat yourself up if you carry a little extra in the thighs and your butt. It's not a bad thing. It just means that you're kind of healthy, okay? So if you want to be super, super lean, it's not really healthy. Just keep that in mind. Do not live by the scale and celebrate your non-scale victories. This is another thing. So if you're putting on muscle mass and you're not really seeing the scale go down, but your clothes are fitting better, that means that your body is redistributing your weight. Remember, muscle is more dense than fat. So it's really important to not beat yourself up. It could be something as simple as you need to have a bowel movement. It could be something as simple as you had too much salt in your meal the night before. Your weight can fluctuate depending upon how tall you are. Like for me, I'm 5 foot tall. My weight can fluctuate by 2 to 3 pounds in a day. So, you know, somebody who's taller than me might see a 5 to 6 pound fluctuation in a day. Don't beat yourself too much about that. Generally, weight loss, even weight gain, if that's your goal for those people we call hard gainers, what you need to understand is that dieting whether up or down, is not a linear process. It's not a perfectly sloped drop. There are generally, peaks and valleys that we experience. You might go up one day and then down the next day and then plateau for a little bit and then down again and then plateau and then maybe up a little bit and then plateau. It's going to happen like that. So don't kill yourself with what the scale says and watching it every day. Maybe once a week, maybe once every month, you're weighing yourself. If you're consistently sticking to a plan, then you don't have to beat yourself up about the scale, okay? If you're really, truly sticking to it. Take changes to your diet one step at a time. Don't change your whole diet. Don't go crazy and be like, no, I'm never going to eat bread again. I'm never going to eat rice again. No. Maybe reduce the amount of those foods in your diet day by day, step by step, week by week, month by month. Slowly reduce those simple carbs out of your diet. And as you reduce those, try increasing protein and fiber, right? So slowly replacing the not so great calories with a little bit better choice in where your calories come from. If you do it all at once, you're bound to fail, okay? Choose a plan that you can live with in the short and the long term. If you're a vegetarian, it's going to be real hard for you to go on a keto diet. So you need to choose something. It's going to mean that you're at minimum going to need to eat a lot of eggs, right? And if you're not comfortable with that idea, then you need to choose something. There's a diet called the Pegan diet, which is a little more flexible. You may have heard of the flexitarian diet. It's kind of along the same lines. Maybe you include a little bit of fish. Maybe you include just eggs, ethically sourced eggs. But you do need some protein in your diet. But you might not want to eat beef and cheese and those kinds of things. So you don't have to, is what I'm saying. You need to find something that works for you. I'm a big proponent of, I'll never just give someone a meal plan and say, eat this. First of all, I'm not a registered dietitian. But second of all, it's not a good idea because I don't know what you like to eat on a regular basis. So me just telling you what to eat, you're not going to be successful with that. I take more of an eat this, not that approach. So let me see what you're already eating and what can we do to substitute it. For example, yogurts. A lot of people go to yogurts. Well, if you're just eating the regular Dannon yogurts and you turn it around and it's got 26 grams of sugar in it, maybe you need to switch to a brand more like Siggy's that has maybe just 11 grams of sugar in it. That's the types of changes that I would talk about looking for. Instead of just having regular yogurt, maybe you go to Greek yogurt where you're getting an increase in your protein. So little small changes where you still get to enjoy what you like, but not with quite so much of the calories that you don't need, like sugar. Avoid regaining the fat by knowing the proper way to reverse diet. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. Incorporate an exercise program that helps you lose and eventually maintain your weight loss. So quickly, I want to say that you can lose weight without ever stepping foot in the gym, never doing any exercise at all. You can lose weight that way. You can absolutely gain weight that way. However, that being said, you're going to be much, much more successful if you actually add some exercise into your routine, especially strength training. Because remember what I said about muscle being active tissue, right? And it burns calories just sitting still. So the more muscle tissue you have, not only will you be stronger, and also your bones will be stronger, because when we pull on those muscles, and the muscle pulls against the bone, it helps your bones create more bone tissue. Just like muscles, as you pull on the muscles and you make them work, it increases the amount of muscle fiber that you have. So strength training, hands down, is the most important type of training that you need to do. Cardio is good, it's healthy for you, but you can get your cardio in a strength training session. You can't do that the other way around. So strength training, hands down, most important type of exercise that you can do, although there is no bad exercise unless it hurts you, okay? All exercise for the most part is good unless it causes you an injury. So how to eat in order to live a healthy lifestyle and not just eating to lose weight, right? We want to be healthy too. It's not just making the scale change that matters. So let's talk about an anti-inflammatory approach. So I'm a big proponent of the Mediterranean diet because for, years, we've known that people who eat this type of diet live longer and are generally healthier well into their senior years. Okay, so there is a lot of benefit to that Mediterranean approach. However, if you're trying to lose weight, it's not necessarily going to get you to your goals. Okay, if you're trying to gain weight, by all means, just eat. You can get away with a little more pasta. All right, you can absolutely get away with a little more beans. But if you're trying to lose weight, right, which is what most people are trying to do, which is why that is more the focus here, then you want to take a more low carb approach. But the problem with the typical ketogenic diet is that it allows a lot of unhealthy foods in. So let's just take a look at what's listed here. So let's start on the right with the ketogenic low carb, high fat diet. So it allows high intake of animal fats, and it doesn't care where they come from. So you can have bacon, you can have butter, you can have cheese, you can have all those to your heart's desire. Well, that can be a little problematic for your heart. Encourages a lot of processed meats, which we know are not great for you. There's a lot of misinformation about red meat being bad for you. It's not the red meat, it's the processed meat. Okay, it's inflammatory because of all the preservatives and the additives added to it. But if you're getting yourself some grass-fed, pasture-raised bison or beef, that is a really healthy choice as far as meat goes. Okay, so don't shy away from red meat simply because you think it's bad for you. It's really the processed meats, the hot dogs, the sausages, the cold cuts. Those are the ones that you have to be conscientious of. It permits artificial sweeteners. Now, I don't want to demonize all artificial sweeteners here, but Splenda and Equal are not your best choices. You're much better off with, there's a brand name called Swerve. It is erythritol. There is monk fruit erythritol blends. Lakanto makes one. Stevia. So all of those are better sweetener choices. So I would try to stay away from like the diet sodas that are still made with Equal and Sweet and Low for that matter. Okay. It also, on a typical ketogenic diet, you can't have any legumes. There's a lot of your vegetables that are limited. A lot of your fruits are limited. You can't have any grains at all. But it does control hunger. You know why? Because it's filled with fat. That's why. Okay. Fat is a very satiating nutrient, fat and protein. It's missing the fiber though. Okay, so it's not particularly good for gut health unless you're trying to kill all of the bacteria in your belly and you're trying to start fresh. Okay, that does exist. You might have heard of the carnivore diet, and some people do that. And if your microbiome is completely in disarray, sometimes it's used therapeutically. So it's not totally a crazy concept, but it needs to be used under the right circumstances and for the right reasons. So now let's talk about the diet all the way on the left, the traditional Mediterranean diet. So traditional Mediterranean diet, first of all, I want to say there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is a good way to eat, especially if you're in maintenance and you're not worried about controlling your weight at all. You could eat the Mediterranean diet without any restrictions and you would be fine from a health perspective. So it's got a higher carb intake. It's got a higher intake of legumes, beans, permits starchy veggies, moderate intake of fruit, limits animal protein and fats, especially red meat. Again, I just want to reiterate that it's not the red meat that's the problem. It is the processed meats. Okay. But if you're trying to lose weight, as most of us are, then the low carb version of a Mediterranean diet is pretty much the healthiest way to lose weight that's out there. It is healthy. It will keep you satisfied so that you feel good. You don't feel deprived. And why? Because it's got a high intake of healthy fats, right? High in olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil to an extent, and butter to an extent. You wouldn't want to go crazy. Those wouldn't want to be your primary sources of fat, but you are allowed to have them. It's low in sugar. You'd have a high intake of vegetables. So we're talking about leafy greens, lots of like cauliflower, your cruciferous vegetables. Those are all fine. You also have a reduced risk of cancer here, just like with the traditional Mediterranean diet. The low carb approach is also going to be neuroprotective. The reason for that, as I spoke about earlier in the presentation, is that fats are important for cellular stability. The outer shell or membrane of each cell is generally made of fat. The sheaths that are around our nerves, the covering, so if you think of an electrical wire, like a wire that your lamp plugs into, that outer covering, that typically it's like a rubber coating or a plastic coating, that is like what we call your myelin sheaths that are around your nerves. So neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and some of these other diseases that eat away at that myelin sheath can cause, like seizure disorders, can cause like misfirings or shorts in your nervous system. So if you're eating enough healthy fats, it helps protect those sheaths because that's what they're made of. So if you eat, healthy fat, you have the resources to keep those myelin sheaths in place or rebuild them. Your body can rebuild them, and it's a very slow process. Increased longevity. We know that because we know about the Mediterranean diet. We don't know everything that causes it, but we do know that it increases longevity. And finally, it's the fact that you're taking a low carb approach and you're eating primarily protein, fiber, and fat. You're going to control your hunger because you're going to be more satiated. So basically, the idea is traditional Mediterranean diet is great for maintenance. Low carb Mediterranean diet is great for weight loss. Okay, and that's what I'm going to recommend when it comes to weight loss. Let's talk a little bit about insulin. So I've mentioned insulin a few times throughout the presentation. So let's take a little moment here to kind of understand the connection. So insulin is often known as the fat storage hormone. In the absence of it, your body does not store as much fat. So if you're eating a higher fat, low carb diet, you are going to store less fat naturally because you're not secreting as much insulin. It works, it's not the end all, by the way, but it works hand in hand with helping you lose weight and be less hungry, because when you have an insulin spike, then at the bottom of that spike, when your sugar cravings are at their worst, is after the drop, right? So you feel fine as you're drinking Coca-Cola maybe, and you get this huge sugar spike. The sugar goes way up. Your insulin has to counteract that. So your pancreas secretes insulin. It says, oh my gosh, we got all this sugar. What are we going to do with it? Let me store it in your hips or your butt or your belly for that matter. So you don't want to overload your body with sugar. So if you look at this graph on the right-hand side, you see the yellow line, that's Coca-Cola. So that yellow line spikes way up, hits the top. Your blood sugar is up here at 50, and then it drops way down, right? And it's below that baseline, which means you're going to be hungry now. You're going to have cravings, and you're going to want sugar again. You're going to feel tired and cranky. That hangry feeling, that's when your blood sugar is way, way down, okay? So the blue line, same chart, right-hand side. The blue line, you're going to see it comes up, and it's a gradual rise. It's not nearly as highly spiked as the Coca-Cola. So it's a gradual rise, and then it slowly drops down. That is because of the fiber content in whole oats. Okay, so the fact that Coca-Cola has no fiber in it spikes through the roof, right? And you're drinking it quick. It's a liquid. It absorbs faster. There's no digestive process that's happening. It's just a straight sugar spike. The blue line, on the other hand, those whole oats, because there's some fiber in there, because your body has to digest it, has to process it, that blood sugar spike is not nearly as high. And then if you look at the green line, same chart on the right, chart number 4, that green line, canned kidney beans, right? Because they are, again, high in fiber and protein, you see that they come up a little bit and then it slowly drops back down. See how much slower that drop is now? Unlike even the oats, it's more of, remember, we're looking at this green line, the canned kidney beans. That spike comes down a lot slower. Your blood sugar is a little more stable, okay? That's because of the fiber and the protein. So now we're talking about something that does have carbs, fiber, and protein. Your spike is not nearly as high. It's buffered, the drop is buffered by the fact that you have some fiber and some protein in there that will help sustain you. And then finally, the red line. This is what's interesting about something that has almost no carbs in it whatsoever. It doesn't. Canned salmon's not going to have any carbs. So you'll see, because you're going to process the fat first. So you're processing that fat. So you just barely drop below the baseline. So we're looking at the red line on chart 4. It's going to drop slowly. It's not a huge dip. It's just a slow drop. And then it starts to come back up as your body is processing the protein in that salmon. So it comes back up, and you can see that just like the kidney beans, it never gets too high because it's processing the protein. And then the dip starts to go down slowly as the protein is processed. That is really what you need to understand about insulin. So insulin really only has to be secreted when you come above that baseline of 0. And small amounts of insulin being secreted in order for you to process protein are fine. That's totally fine. But what you don't want is that huge spike like you see with the Coca-Cola, that yellow line on chart 4. So let's look at the chart on the left. So we're looking at chart 3 now. Take a look at the instant oats. That's going to be the yellow line on chart 3 here on the left. It goes way up, not quite as high as the Coca-Cola, but it goes way up. Compare that to the whole oats. See how the instant oats goes straight up and straight down? And the whole oats, it's more of a rounded bend. It's not quite as high of a spike, and it's also not quite as fast of a drop. You know why? Because the instant oats are more processed. Your body doesn't have to do anything to break it down. There's a little less fiber in them usually because they process them to a finer consistency. So again, the whole oats are going to be a much better choice for you than instant oats. And this is why, because there's less of a blood sugar response and less of an insulin jump. Okay. And then you can see, the salmon with oats, it's a little bit higher of a spike this time because you've added some carbs to it. And then the whole oats not soaked before cooking because, again, it's about the processing of it. It's going to be an even slower rise. So, you've got a higher fiber content in something that hasn't been soaked because you haven't soaked out some of those carbs or some of the fiber. And it just is it's a whole product. It's whole. So your body has to break it down, which means it's going to go a little slower with that insulin response. So in other words, what you take away from this is eat whole foods, right? Minimally processed. Choose primarily protein and fat and fiber as the basis of all of your meals, and you're going to keep your blood sugar under control. Okay? That's the takeaway. If you have too high of a sugar spike, you're going to store all those extra calories as fat, and that's not what you want. Nobody wants that. And you're going to be hungry. All right, implementation. Putting the money where their mouth is. MyFitnessPal. This is the app I'm talking about. Free to use. Excellent, excellent tool. You can use the paid version if you want to, but it's not required. It's not necessary. And you can still do everything you need to with the regular MyFitnessPal. It will help you calculate out your caloric needs. And then it's up to you to set the protein, carbs, and fat. That is something that I am more than happy to help you with. And once you get on track and you're really tracking absolutely everything that you are eating, you don't do this forever. This is why I offer an 8-week challenge. But you don't do this forever, but use it as an opportunity to learn. And yes, you do have to weigh and measure your food. I'm sorry, but you have to. It's the only way that you're going to learn what a proper portion size looks like. In restaurants, you can ask, but at home, you need to weigh and measure at least for the first few weeks because it's going to give you that visual understanding of what a proper portion size looks like, okay? You have to keep a food diary. Sorry to break it to you, but if you want to be successful, you gotta. So why it works? It doubles your chance of weight management success. Doubles. Why? Because number one, awareness. Logging your food intake limits mindless and impulse eating. If you have to track it, you're gonna be a little more aware of what you choose. Education. Weighing and measuring your foods, at least in the beginning, helps you learn what a proper serving size actually looks like. It's what I just said, right? Accountability. If you know you have to log your food, You're not going to sit at the couch with a whole bag of chips. You are going to have to weigh and measure them. You're going to know what a serving size looks like. Okay, this is where we get into trouble. So awareness, education, accountability, that's why you keep the food log. Again, you don't have to do it forever, just until you've got a proper grasp on what you're supposed to be eating as far as what your personal goals are, okay? Reverse dieting, maintenance. This is what I was talking about briefly earlier. So reverse dieting, basically that means, so you've done all this work to get to your goal, right? Your maintenance goal. Now you have to figure out how to maintain it without screwing up and gaining it all back, right? Here's how you do it. You slowly walk your diet and calories back up to a maintenance level while repairing your metabolism. It will actually make you leaner because you don't want to stay on a diet forever, right? You don't want when you hit your goal, the whole goal is to maintain it. You don't want to gain it back and do this again. And so you'll slowly step your caloric intake up by 10% each week until you reach a comfortable intake level. If you start to gain weight, you just roll it back down and increase your activity level. You'll take it right off because you're still in that phase, okay? But this is the most important part, the most important, because this is where people go wrong. They start to just go back to eating whatever they want, and then you gain it all back, and you're back on that yo-yo dieting again. You don't want that. So this is important. Slowly walk your calories back up. And then if you gain anything, you roll it back down, and that's your maintenance BMR. That's where you need to stay. Okay. And once you've had that under control for several months, like 6 to 12 months, where you're just maintaining, you're probably going to stay there and you're not going to have to think about it as much anymore. And eventually, if you ever get off track, you come back to using MyFitnessPal, you track for a little bit, and you're going to be back in maintenance. Just don't let it get out of control again. That's what it comes down to. Once you get to that maintenance weight, where your body's happy weight, and you've got the amount of muscle mass that you want, you're feeling really good, you really have to be conscientious in this phase until you're in it for about 6 to 12 months. After about 6 to 12 months, your body's going to stabilize. But if you just bounce back to eating what you used to eat, you're going to gain it back instantly and oftentimes more. So that's what you don't want to happen. Do this method, okay? So we're almost at the end. Understand that you can never go back to just eating whatever you want, whenever you want, but you can enjoy everything you eat. So I don't want you to hate your diet, right? I want you to eat foods that you enjoy. Just understand what your portion sizes are, okay? Learn to become more mindful of when you're actually hungry and see food as nourishment. You can have cake at a party. You can have, little cocktail wieners if you want to. Just know that that's a once in a while thing. During Thanksgiving, eat everything that you want. And the next day, when you're bloated and tired, you're going to remember why you don't do that every day. Okay? Do not use food as a reward. Never, ever. It's a bad habit to get into because, if you go and exercise for 2 hours and then you come home and eat a pint of ice cream, you basically undermined everything you just did at the gym. So don't do that. Buy yourself some clothes instead. Always remember to savor your food. So if you take a little bit of a mindful approach to eating and you actually slow down and pay attention to your food and you turn the TV off and you eat consciously, you're going to probably eat less anyway. And if you do overeat or fall off the wagon, if you go crazy on Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or, a birthday or whatever the event is, it's okay. Get right back on track with your next meal. Your next meal. Don't say, I'll start on Monday. No, do it on your next meal. And then you're going to get right back where you were without gaining a bunch of weight and having to get back into that yo-yo dieting, which is what we're all trying to avoid. Okay? That's it. You got this. Don't quit. If you stumble, get back up. What happened yesterday doesn't matter anymore. Today's another day, so get back on track and move closer to your dreams and goals. You can do it. You can do it. And I'm here to help you. So if you have any questions, if you need some assistance getting set up with MyFitnessPal and tracking and understanding all of this on a deeper level, and you need someone to assist you with that, that's what I'm here for. You can always reach out to me. And I look forward to working with you. And those of you that are doing the challenge with me, you're going to have great results. I know you are. And there's a lot of fun to be had when you have people that are doing it with you, that sense of camaraderie. So let's get started and don't give up.